No animals, just pine trees. And,
Two counties, resolution.
So we're,
yeah. 300.
we all know each other.
There's some to do.
Wait a minute now.
We're all.
I mean, it's easy enough to
This will see.
well,
Okay, ready?
to work with a business call.
Good afternoon, everybody. We want to call to order the Children's Trust regular meeting, to be followed by, at some point, the budget committee. And, first thing I need to do is tell everybody hello, and then, read a new dialogue. Begins by, any member of the public wishing to be heard shall complete a physical or virtual comment card and present the card to the clerk of the trust, that would be Ashley, prior to the start of the board meeting. Members of the public recognized by the chair will have 3 minutes to speak on a single subject matter submitted on their comment card presented prior to the start of the meeting. Clerk of the trust will function as the official timekeeper. If you have a comment for the final trim hearing beginning at 5:01, please present a comment card to the clerk of the trust prior to that time. At the previous meeting, we passed a motion to allow board members to participate virtually, so long as we had a quorum physically present, which we do, due to the extraordinary circumstances of COVID-19. The clerk will now call roll call and verify that at least 6 members of the trust are participating in the meeting. So, Ashley?
Here.
Here. Here. Member Snyder? Here. Member Smiley? Here. Member Wilson-Horn? Here.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the approval of agenda, the consent and regular agenda. And part of that, are there any changes to the agenda, Colin? We have a number of items on the consent. Motion.
So approval of the agenda and consent agenda?
Second. Motion is second. Any comments by the commission? Any comments for that? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion is unanimous. Chairman's report, I'll turn it over to Colin for the executive director's report.
We do the governance committee first, Mr. Chair, or next? I'm next, so I'm sorry.
Yes. I think that's okay. That's what you wrote down, so.
I did, okay, I'm ready to go. I have a few pithy remarks. Just wanted to, this is our team, we're fully staffed. I want to introduce you our most recent staff member, Elizabeth Cason. Would you mind standing? Okay, you can sit down. Yeah, I'm excited to have Liz. She's responsible for leading our community engagement efforts and the particular focus on building relationships with stakeholders, local community partners, certain service providers to ensure the community is aware of the trust effort. She's been doing this a long time. She's been engaged in community development and government relations in Palm Beach County for the last 30 years. She brings extensive experience in community advocacy and development. So this is her 3rd special district. She worked for the hospital district down there before going to the Palm Beach Children's Services Council. And we were lucky enough to get her here. We had good luck with Palm Beach. Claudia talked over the counties from Palm Beach, and we figured we couldn't go wrong. So I'm glad Liz is here. She writes down, she's Hispanic, so she's our in-house translator as well. She hasn't had to do that yet, but that's kind of a bonus. And she jumped right in with 2 things we did instantly. One is, she helped us put together boxes right away with the project Youth Build Armchair. Last week or this week? Last week? We got the eggs to seal it. The other thing is, I went with Liz today to the delegation breakfast hosted by the chamber, and she's not shy. I think she knows all the legislators, their aides, and I was just, well, just let me follow, let me keep up with it. So it's going to be great. And so we have a full group, and this is with.
Welcome.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Thank all y'all for being here. Thank y'all for making us look good. We appreciate it.
So I drew this picture. This is from a writer named Les McKeown, a business consultant, and I think it's just important for me to think where our organization's at. This picture is a cycle of an organization from start to finish. So from when it starts, when it dies, as happens from time to time, especially in the private sector. I'll say that when it comes to government, we're unique in that elected officials are up for re-election from time to time. This whole organization will be up for reauthorization in 2030. So we too could experience the full cycle if we don't do a good job, but we're going to do a great job. When things get started, there's this early struggle period where you're trying to figure out how things work. If I had to say what the early struggle was, it might be those first trust meetings with a new board. In fact, there wasn't even a full board. Supposedly things get fun. You're in this fun period when you're growing. I think the fun period lasted for 3 weeks for me before COVID started. Then it started to get crazy. But now with a full group, just to be real frank, we're kind of in the whitewater period. And the whitewater period, we're still trying to learn who does what. We have job descriptions, but every time someone comes in, there's a new procedure or way of doing things, there's no routines yet. But where we would like to get as quickly as we can is to this stage of predictable success. My guess would be that this year will be some more whitewater as we start to build our funding portfolio, but we'll be in good shape as we use this, the rest of this upcoming fiscal year. But by the time we're sitting here next year, we'll be in great shape. So that's just a little bit of where I see the newsflash, you have a full budget in front of you with a plan to spend most of the $5 million for organizations, but there's not going to be enough money to meet all of the needs of all of the children. And so everything we say yes to, naturally a trade-off against something else. Every nickel we save is something we can reinvest back into a children's program somewhere else. But that's the unfortunate reality. I listened to the CAP, in preparing for tomorrow, I listened to the CAP awards. And I think there was a theme there. There's so much need and not enough money. But the fact of the matter is there's just limited resources. So, good rule of thumb, I think I used this phrase my very first day in Gainesville, is making a massive positive difference for the greatest number of kids in the shortest period of time. So we can do a lot of things. Some things make a massive difference. But they're very expensive, so we're not able to help very many kids. We can do things that touch a lot of kids but don't make much of a difference. We can even do things that make a difference, but it might take years to realize. So the sweet spot is if we can find something that really hit all three, we'll be in good shape. So this is our budget. There's no pictures in the budget book. I think I'll add those next year, but when you look at expenditures, 60% of the $8 million is directly to grants and aid, and the other 14% is in reserves and transfers, and those represent money put aside for the building and an appropriated reserve, which if we need to, we can use whatever the board feels necessary. Then we have our fees as a property and tax collector, and then operational and dollar expenses. Look at our program funding right now. The graph looks a little different. The pie, I should say. The big green area is access to high-quality child care, after-school, and summer programs. That's about 44% of total funding. 20%, believe it or not, is professional development and capacity building. And then you have supporting career exploration and preparation, and then the rest of the sections make up the rest. 8% is still unallocated. Christie will talk a little bit about what the plan is going to be on and recommendations on how to allocate the remaining funds, but that's what it was for. That's our budget up to this point. And next month we'll have a report out on how we did in the summer. Preliminarily, we're going to spend about $700,000 at the 22 sites. We had 1,059 unduplicated children show up to our summer site. That gets the massive positive difference for the greatest number of children point in a very short period of time. Early feedback from the surveys that we got from parents. Here, I'll just go through some of the comments. Continue this program because it's a major help. This was my daughter's first experience. The scholarship was the only way we could afford to go. We heard this shows up several times. Amazing thing was the last sentence. Continue helping the children to receive scholarships in order to ignite the spark that keeps them wondering about our world. Everything's connected. Thank you for such an amazing program for our youth. My child is learning new skills over the summer and really appreciates the program. Just hope they will continue to support this incredible program. The program has really inspired my son to love and enjoy science, and he's not using it to extent. I would say that's exactly the kind of responses we were looking for. And that should be a really big win. Looking for a win as a board, I would count the summer so far. I think, again, we'll hear more details next week. Here, one more letter. Commissioner Ross Ambrose from High Springs forwarded me an email. It was long from one parent. I could have, done 3 or 4 slides. I thought I'd just pull out one. Because this one slide to me pretty much sums up, the whole point of high quality activities and youth development. A young lady with 4 or 5 kids, I think she had 5 actually, Erin Sapienza said, I would also like to comment on the impressive quality of counselors artists camp. Good news. First camp in High Springs, and they had never run a summer camp. They really invested in the kids and built up their confidence and their art and creativity. All of my kids have noticeable increases in their independence and self-confidence over the course of the camp. My kids were all positively impacted from their interactions with their counselors who went above and beyond to do their job. So we really had some great and based on comments like this, I'm not really sure we won't do that. So thank you for approving that program, and let's do it. And I look forward to Christie's presentation that the program team will have next week. Reminder, some of the new programs in our budget. The Help Me Grow RFP is on the street as we speak. This is a program essentially that helps parents ensure that their child is developing at the right pace, both in social, emotional, or developmental, or behavioral even. They get a screen, then connected to services, and then care coordinated to make sure that the families receive the services that they need. So, looking for an implementing agency. There's a bidders conference. I think it's Friday, right? Yeah, Friday, and so we're excited to see what that brings. The Business Leadership Institute is going to be great. The problem the Business Leadership Institute is going to help us solve is, while we have supporting capacity in child care centers for quality service delivery, there's a big business problem in child care right now on how to, if teachers leave the industry today, then a lot of that training literally goes out the door. The Business Leadership Institute is going to contribute to trying to at least help solve that problem. And, if we can work out an accreditation program, it'll help centers that can, use this to become accredited to drive down extra funds to, shore up their business. This will be something that we'll be partnering with the Chamber with, and, we'll talk more about this in the next few meetings as well. We're going to start tracking our our workforce, and we'll start with early learning, but this is something that can be done in out-of-school time through the Children's Forum portal. This will be something new to Alachua County. On more of on a smaller proof of concept scale, we'll also be introducing the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. We'll be contributing to certain zip codes, and look forward to the suckers that are helping us to say exactly just what kind of effect or impact it's having. We expect it mostly to be an awareness type program, but it's interesting because I think it's House Bill 3. This is for children 0 to 4, and once you hit 5 years old now, the state legislature is working with school districts to have every student that's received a 1 or 2 on their FSA to receive books in the mail starting December directly to their home. That project will be managed by the Lastinger Center, so for the whole state. So in Alachua County, you can get a book 0 to 4 right now, depending on where you live. That's not enough. Once you hit elementary school, you'll start to get a book to your house every month. So we kind of contribute to this, emerging continuum. And then lastly, the team will have more to say on this, but Youth Development Capacity Building Collaborative, we're having quite a bit of folks sign up. There'll be 4 sessions in October, and that will prepare us for capacity building funding later in the year, I guess towards January, and then our after-school and summer funding shortly after that. Every program will have performance measures, and at the next meeting, the programs team will be, we call it a snapshot, 1-pager, except they're not 1 page, maybe a term sheet if you use, government language, but of each of the short description of the program. We've funded some of these programs a few years, what they've done in the past, and some of their targets for this year. We'll have that for every single program we fund. And we want to point out that in spite of the budget and changes in Schedule C, of the 15 strategies, we still have 7 of them that don't have any funding allocated to them as of yet. I will tell you that, as I said, Christy is going to talk in a bit about the plan to do that for $383,000. We do have making some recommendations on a few match requests at the next meeting, and if you recall, we also had a presentation. We'll have some recommendations for the resource centers here real soon as well. Essentially, what the board is asked to approve in the budget is the sum total of $5,014,000 and change. So as money between the different programs, can be reallocated as needed. Contract negotiations are unspent from one program, or this can all be shifted around. And so if that happens, we have a recommendation on how to deploy those funds. But the next set of the next I just lost my train of thought. It's getting old stuff is rough. Anyways, Christy will say. That's it. That's it for me.
Any questions?
So the Dolly Parton, the book, I've heard feedback that students who have a transient family background, like having books sent to houses, can be a challenge because they're moving. So I don't know if we see an opportunity where the school district can support that for students who may have a concern with permanent housing. And so I don't know if this is something you just want to mention, because I think it's something that we can look for some opportunities.
The challenge for the school districts with that is that their kids won't be in school. Is that right, Pat? It's only 0 to 4.
It's 0 to 5 years. I mean, we're still in pretty central locations.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think the challenge is that what is required, and I'm not an expert, but my understanding of it is that each family or someone who's willing to pay $25 a year for instance, but it's at the individual family level. But we probably should follow up with, for leading that initiative, go travel, and see how it goes. So far, my understanding is they're able to connect with the family. But I think early on, we had conversations in the library and the schools about having the books because the reading available, widely available. They know about the community reading the books.
Right.
Yeah.
You can circle back on that.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
About that issue.
Thank you, Rob. Kim, is library doing anything about books? I thought at one point they were giving out books.
There's a library has an agreement with, every town has a library card. I'm not aware of the 0 to 5.
Well, the last time we talked to Jenny about it, they did, but that was going back maybe.
Yeah.
It started to be like a conversation.
And I thought that when the child was born or something, they gave the child a book. Somewhere, but that was. So you might want to see it, with the library.
Yeah, I'll have Shane check in the column and see how we can.
Any other questions? If not, I'm going to turn it over to the very capable chair of the governance committee.
Okay.
Who has, what books were you using?
I won't be pithy, I promise.
But it's deep and full of meaning.
It's deep and full of meaning, but not pithy. Employee handbooks are seldom pithy. So the first of the recommended policies that we looked at was, in fact, the employee handbook. And if you look at tab 6 of our board book, starting on page 54, I will tell you that some of the changes repeat throughout, and they're absolutely just a Scrivener kind of error in terms of changing fiscal, finance, and administration to HR, human resources, since we now are contracted out those human resources to James Moore. So they're serving as the HR department, if you will, for the trust, and so it's no longer finance and administration. So that's just a change to recognize that we have somebody doing that work, and you'll see that change throughout. And then some of the changes were recommended, in fact, by our HR consultant at James Moore, that for clarification or for legal reasons, and Bob had some input into some of those changes as well. So most of them are just small and technical changes. I had a question because it talks about sick leave and when it accrues, and that was just simply an omission from the prior. It's no change in the way it was set up or what staff have been told. That appears on page 4. There is a total rewrite of the harassment policy and whistleblower, again, much lengthier, much more detailed. Again, on the advice of our HR consultant, we looked at that, had some small comments about some of the wording, which unfortunately the editing tool did not make easy, and so if you will see some things at the very, very back of the employee handbook that are going to be add-ons, and one of those is discussion of making sure that people understand that there is some public records law that applies and that therefore complaints and issues related to a complaint might eventually become part of public record disclosure. We felt people needed to know that up front. That actually is going to be a separate section of its own, a separate article in the policy, so it's clear that it applies regardless. And then the other big change is the addition of FMLA. Again, that's at the back. It'll go in section 4.6. Because of the governmental status of the trust, it is subject to FMLA, and so that had been left out of the original employee handbook and is now will be added. And then also language related to diversity, equity, and inclusion was added in, as well as policies regarding travel for non-exempt employees. Most of the employees of the trust at this point are not exempt, are hourly, and therefore you have to be very careful about how you spell out what parts of their daily activity, if they're away from the office, constitute work time. And so this just does a really careful job of laying that out so that everybody's clear from the outset as to what those parameters are. And I think, as I said, if you look further ahead onto starting on page 74, you see the FMLA policy. It's pretty standard FMLA language for anybody who's worked with FMLA. And then there's a little bit of language to clarify that you can't make allegations of wrongdoing or harassment maliciously. There was just a clarifying statement. You'll see the change in language in red on page 79. And then on page 81 is the proposed language around public records law to make sure that everyone understands that whatever's part of the records here is public record at some point. Obviously, during an investigation, it's not, but once the investigation is concluded, it does become public record. And so we reviewed those in detail with the HR consultant, and the recommendation of the committee is that they be approved, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Question, please. So the sexual harassment wording and I'm sorry, the sexual harassment wording, which is on page
60
yep,
is the whole stuff that was struck out and then replaced.
and then the whistleblower wording, which is on page 4. That came as a recommendation to page 4.
Yes,
Okay, and then Bob added the public records wording.
correct.
to make sure that-
Right. There was just some concern that there be no confusion, that if there was an investigation subsequent to its conclusion, that investigation could be a part of a public records request, and therefore,
And then the only other thing is we're recommending deletion of the
of what?
unsolicited proposal.
That's a different policy.
Different policy. Okay.
I haven't gotten there yet. I figured we should take these one at a time.
Yeah, this is just a
So this is just for the employee handbook. I'm going to stop there, and I think we should make motions on each of them because there's some different kinds of issues involved in all of them, I think. Don't you, Mr. Chair?
Okay, so I would do approval of the changes to the employee.
motion. Do we have a second? Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed?
All right, next, on page 83, the investment management policy. Again, this part of this is a result of actually having an executive director. It is no longer the clerk that is going to be making these decisions, so it's the executive director. We did have a significant discussion about how that would work. And basically, right now, all of our funds are in cash. We're not looking to start investing probably until January, at which point we will need to make a decision about an investment committee or some sort of structure with investment managers to make sure that there is oversight and assurance of compliance with the investment policy. So this just really kind of lays out, at this point, we have a 5% operating reserve target, and at some point we'll want to invest that reserve, and this just kind of talks about the usual kinds of considerations in terms of how much you want in equity, how much you want to be easily made liquid, those kinds of considerations. So with the understanding that we will, at the point where we start to invest, have some sort of an investment committee or some sort of investment oversight that includes the board, we would recommend passing.
Emphasize that we would do that in January.
Right. Correct. And so really, that's it for this one.
A motion, do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? Any public discussion? And all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous?
And then last is the procurement policy. And the changes there's only one really substantive change. On page 2, the deletion is simply because it's redundant to the rest of the statements and the rest of the policy. It was just repetitious. The big substantive change is the elimination of the unsolicited proposals. A lot of discussion, as you might imagine, around that topic. And we needed to be clear that what we were addressing here was a policy of how procurement happens, and that there's plenty of mechanisms within the policy without that unsolicited proposal clause. If we see there's an emergency or some sort of an urgent situation or need to do single source or other kinds of procurement mechanisms rather than a competitive RFP-based procurement. The process of having unsolicited proposals is disruptive to the staff workflow, to making sure that everything fits within the priorities that we have established. And what we had is a long conversation about then what are the mechanisms for input as to things that we might not be considering immediately as a proposal. And the discussion there, again, we have, as board members, receive input all the time that we could certainly have placed on the agenda for discussion if we think there's a funding initiative that needs to be prioritized or changed or added in. In addition, if we see an emergent sort of situation, staff can certainly bring that to us as a funding need. And then lastly, we now have our new community engagement person, and we have the youth collaborative coming up, and there was a lot of discussion as we were working through this to be sure that we had mechanisms for grassroots stakeholders in the community to make sure they had access to trust staff in an orderly and organized structure to bring these new ideas to us for the kinds of programming that might be effective within particular communities and align with the initiatives and the priorities that we set out for each year without being disruptive to the flow and work of the trust and the staff. So our recommendation, given that, is that we go ahead and accept the recommendation to delete that unsolicited proposals clause. And I do think that was the longest part of the discussion that we had in the meeting, is making sure that by taking this out, we were not eliminating a vehicle for community input as to what the trust might fund. So I'll stop it.
Any questions? Not, get it.
Yeah, so I would move that we adopt these changes to procurement. I do have some comments, because I think, but I think that would be it.
Discussion?
Yeah, so my discussion on this, Mr. Chair, is that I think we are still at the stage of our life cycle in the, I guess we had a little, in the whitewater stage, called the whitewater stage, where we have a number of goals with no funding allocated. And I think through that, as we are now fully staffed up and we start to engage in the community, we're going to see some opportunities be presented to address some of those needs. We just don't know. It's kind of, we don't know, you know, the whole road so far at all. But what we don't know, we don't know. And I also think, though, that we shouldn't be putting that on our staff. That as these are brought to the board, that it's our responsibility to then direct staff to create process to evaluate these different opportunities in a way that is beneficial, first of all, to kids in our community, but secondly, in a way that our taxpayers can trust. You know, they trust how we're spending the money. So I can see us making exceptions, or the board making exceptions when an opportunity presents itself, but then asking staff to kind of flesh it out for us, and not putting that on our staff to make the decision to not be back out. I agree with taking this out, but I also want to comment that there are still a significant amount of unmet priorities where when we have a discussion about how are we going to use fund balance, one-time fund balance to set up systems. I want to try to address some of those priorities in a way, and have staff flesh that out for us so that we can put that money.
I think,
One other comment, and I also think we'll have opportunities, say with school board, with ESSER funds, or with the county, with American Rescue Fund, or with the CAP program of leveraging funds, with other organizations where, it's more than just matching, it's leveraging additional, government funding entities where the trust can play a role in fulfilling some of our priorities, which will form kind of an unsolicited proposal with other agencies that we can work with. Board should hear those, and then direct staff to kind of work with staff to leverage.
yeah, I think that reflects a lot of the comments that we had during the meeting, Ken. I think we just wanted to be sure that there was a vehicle that didn't put the burden on staff in a way that was completely and continuously disruptive.
Opportunity to use it collaboratively, because most of the ideas we're going to hear might not be fully vetted, and it gives an opportunity to, budget something to work across the board and say, good.
I mean, I just think, like, the county has a housing trust fund that the charter was established. We made a decision 2 meetings ago that we're gonna put $6 million of the American Rescue Fund into that trust, that housing trust fund, but we're not sure how we're gonna spend it. I can see an opportunity or a program with families in need that have small children, where that money can be accessed by the trust, and the trust can help direct some of that money to another proposal coming from another government agency to help with the staff of the trust to kind of place the right people. That's, I wouldn't envision that we would have that in a policy, but those opportunities are going to present themselves.
Any other comments?
I have, previously, the criteria that is listed on page 101, I understand, those criteria that refer to other evaluation factors under number 5. And on page 104, which is now A3, talks about the evaluation, including whether the proposal meets the stated goals and objectives, whether it's need and whether the costs are commensurate, the outcome. And I just wondered if people thought that there might need to be maybe clarification about what is number 5 versus what is number 3, those two things.
Page 3, section 101, there's 2 page numbers, so that makes it confusing. So, we have one procurement code. We have a whole procurement code as a standalone government. We procure everything to the same code, whether it's direct community services or buying a coffee machine or whatever. So, this is the competitive field. Well, page 101 is the competitive field proposal to help me grow, where we put out an RFP. What's referenced on 5 is evaluation, examples of evaluation criteria for those types of RFPs. For others, with competitive field proposals, you should have wide latitude depending on what you're purchasing and what you use to evaluate. So actually, we don't use all of these. So that's one way, a competitive process where we issue an RFP, that's one. The other one you referenced, can you tell me the page again? Was it page 104? 104.
Page 104.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because that one's matching funds.
That's matching.
Yeah, I know, Colin, I was just wondering whether I understand it, the difference is whether it's clear what criteria, essentially what you're saying is it's going to be in the RFA program.
Right.
What's the evaluation criteria?
Yeah.
Typically with a match, they respond to some other RFP, different evaluation, and so we have to kind of make sense of
Yeah,
It makes sense with our goals.
good question, though.
Sorry for that long answer.
No, it's okay. I just didn't see anything under 101.5. I didn't, outcomes or evaluation.
Okay.
That's all.
Got it.
Questions from the public? Motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next item looks like, Christmas program calendar and after-school program.
So the first, item under the programs report, you'll find, the program calendar for fiscal year 21-22. This calendar, we have created this for, the remainder of this contract year as well as moving forward to, fiscal year 2021. And so we will provide these updates every, board meeting. Remember that it is subject to change to reflect any program, changes that take place, each month. But this is to help you all,
Great.
and help us as well stay on track with what is to come, as we are releasing proposals, funding programs in the contract years. Next item, under the programs report is the after-school program, story. What we've done with this story summary is we have updated, this story to include the Boys and Girls Club. They scored a 3.3 after they were evaluated, their after-school program in response to the RFP. And they have now been included in the contract negotiations for after-school, program.
On, page 108, when do we put out the RFP for summer of 2022?
So the staff is currently working, on what that plan will look like. We are, remember we have that collaborative, and so there's a lot of, meetings and, sharing of best practices and that information that is going to help us to determine what that funding opportunity is going to look like. We are hopeful that it will be the beginning of, in January of 22, to allow plenty of time for those that meet the criteria to, review that response and apply.
So the thought is then that this schedule will be updated, we have that in January or February, once you know that.
Absolutely.
I like this a lot, because it helps
Yeah.
understand kind of what y'all are thinking with regards to timing wise, so.
And then I do have, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll just ask if there are any further questions. I have one, but go ahead.
So I was going to provide additional, updates for programming, just so that you guys are aware of where we are. So we are getting ready to close out, fiscal year 2021. The contract due in September 30th, and, final program reports from our current, contract are due October 5th. All final invoices are due to the trust October 15th. We now, as you, are aware, are fully staffed and have an evaluator on staff who will be looking at that data, looking at the information that the providers are sending to us, and we'll be able to provide reports to you all for the different types of programming, the funding, how they have expended, what they were awarded. And, that information will not only be presented to the board, but we'll also be able to, provide that information in annual reports and different items that go out to the community. Our summer, programming, the final week of summer was August 2nd. Final invoices as well as participant surveys from those summer programs are being uploaded into our data system, now. We also have providers completing end of the year reports and providing feedback to the trust regarding the funding process, as we will take, all of that information into consideration along with our, youth development capacity building collaborative. The final summer, report will be presented to the board, in October as Colin stated. For our after-school programming. We are negotiating contracts with 6 after-school providers. Those providers are listed on the employee summary sheet. Contracts for after-school programming will go through October through June 30. All of our contracts for after-school programming will have set deliverables, performance measures, as well as deadlines for invoicing. Site visits will be conducted with all of those providers. Providers will conduct participant surveys as well, and providers will submit end-of-the-year reports and provide feedback for the process to the trust. Next is our youth development capacity building collaborative.
Question?
Yep.
Before we get off after school, Simon, do you know the total number of kids that participate in after school? Do you know the total number of kids that participate in after school?
In all after school or in EDEP?
Yeah, in all of after school. Do you have any
I
idea?
don't know that.
I'm trying to understand what percentage of those kids are funded. Just for the youth.
Well, again, the EDEP is actually about between 4,000 and 5,000.
EDC.
Yeah. And there's some 21st century programs at the district. It looks like the average one has about 50 kids. I think they have 4 or 5 sites maybe. Now, I had Bonnie Wagner, our researchers, pull the data from DCF. There's actually 83 licensed child care centers that provide after-school care, 83. And 50 some out of those receive school readiness dollars, and contracted to receive school readiness dollars for after-school programming. I don't know if that is up to numbers. I know the ELC funds about 400 in school-age child care. This would be a relatively small portion.
Yeah, so that's fine. Thanks.
Is there any way we can find out the total number of children that it makes a difference? I mean, is there a way to determine that? I mean, it's kind of subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the demand?
Yeah, that's going to be part of the planning process. Now, I will tell you, right now we have two different strategies with child care. It comes to 0 to 5. We're not funding any slots. We have adopted a total capacity building professional development strategy between what we're giving to the centers, business and accreditation side, and the support coming from the Early Learning Coalition delivering the TPD map. So my guess is the Learning Coalition has been able to clear waiting lists relatively quickly. A lot of that has to do with the $2.5 billion thrown to the state through federal funding. That won't last forever, but that's one strategy. The reason why that strategy works and why centers are interested in it is in order to keep their federal funding, they have to meet minimum quality standards. So the TPD program, delivered by the Early Learning Coalition, helps centers maintain quality scores to receive the federal funding. So you can actually look at a center and see what their quality measurement is, and we can see the ones that we helped see. And they also get a financial incentive for improving quality scores. So far, the strategy in after school to this RFP was we're funding a little bit of everything. Some room for seats, there's some other stuff in the budget. So one of the things I think that we would like to think through is question, what are the capacity needs? In other words, additional slots needed for kids. That's one, that is one question. The other question is, what are the different supports needed to improve or maintain or uplift or whatever you're going to be, the quality of the program. So it's almost two separate things. We really didn't have the opportunity to think through that in this RFP, but those would be some of the questions we try to answer. One way to look at it is, that's part of the planning process. I mean, I'm sure there's wait lists at EDC schools, wait lists at 20. Those would be the kind of information we look for. But those are some of the questions we'll try to answer in the next.
So I appreciate this. I think one thing though is like, when we look at after-school programs, like there's childcare, like a parent is working. But I think we also have, especially in our older children, activities to do to either enrich in the performing arts area or to, you know, focus on academic, other supports. So they may not show up as I need childcare because I'm old enough to care for myself. But I think that those are something that we should also just remember, and it may not show up in a survey at that level.
You know, critical thing that I think needs something, if we, you know, the care that they need.
Well, I guess I'm thinking if you're assessing need, I may not know that I need to participate in a drama program after school, but if you expose that to programming, you might totally grab my attention, and that's exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life, or something in that area. And I think older kids, there's opportunities there.
And to that, Carly, I guess it boils down to, you know, where we are with the dollars that we have, and, you know, at some point, right now, we didn't utilize all the money that we had for after-school opportunities. At some point, demand is going to be so great, we're going to have to prioritize what's essential, what is, you know, an added thing. That's a discussion, I don't think we're there yet.
Well, I would agree, but I do think, I mean, if we're looking at essential, I think we need to look at, like, situations that I'm assuming Judge Bullard runs into quite a bit, where it may not, it's like a different end of a dilemma.
Right.
Yeah, I think the difference becomes the need to be taken care of versus the need to have something to do that keeps you out of the potential things that you can think of on your own at that age, which might not be so helpful.
Well, and to spark joy.
To spark joy, yeah.
Life.
Yeah.
Chris, I have a question on the programs. In cost, I'll look at the program. Because this is new, and at some point, they'll reach some sort of economies of scale, which will create, you know, the cost per child going down, or is this just, you know, if they add more children, it's just going to continue?
So, one thing you can remember, something that Colin talked about last month, and what we're gonna be doing moving forward is we're taking a look, you know, not only locally, but across the state at what that cost, is and what it should be, so that we can work toward, a cost that could, you know, align across the scale.
Well,
Yeah.
and y'all are gonna work on that, you know, at some point. You know, which sparks, you know, bottom line, again, we have the money now. At some point, we're gonna have, you know, the discussion that you just heard, that if something is out of line, you know, what makes it so expensive? How do we go about evaluating it, as opposed to, because, you know, this program is gonna handle, 25 children, but, you know, we get something that handles 100 children. This costing so much, we can't do these. You know, those are the discussions that we're going to have. Okay.
Can I say something to that? I mean, I think the outcomes are also extremely important, which I appreciate the fact that we'll have the evaluations, because if it's just making sure a child is safe and supervised, I'd see that as a different return on the investment than a child who's working on decoding skills and
Right.
coming out more literate than when it started. And so
Yeah.
I would like to have all of those together.
Yep.
You get what you pay for.
And I agree. We still need to look at costs.
So we agree with Dr. Simon. I agree with their bifurcation of childcare and enrichment activities. we're trying to figure out how to differentiate, expanded learning is one term that's used, either expanded learning that takes place in multiple places where the kids are. With the last RFP, it just so happens that we heard the need was to get kids off the street, so we were funding extra places for kids to go. But that's not the only thing we should be involved with, because as you saw from the summer, what the kids liked was the type of activities they were engaged in, high-quality programs and things that was the comment. So those programs, I can say 100% don't have a place in our whatever our funding. But my point is that they'll have a place in our next RFP, and measuring the quality of the programs, or the type of interactions and activities they're doing with kids, while it's challenging, it can be done. I've done that before where it came from. Still involves some community capacity to do that. But, so I guess they will definitely have a place in what we're doing going forward.
Sorry, I'm late. I don't know what's been said and what hasn't, but when you talk about cost per child.
Nothing has been said other than what.
Okay. I guess to sort of tag along with what Colin, Dr. Simon, and yourself have said, I am concerned about cost per child, but then I think also like it could be a little bit misconstrued if you don't really drill down and see the type of programming that these organizations may be providing. So I can't talk for anybody else, but I actually have saw they're hiring somebody, bringing in another provider to do another organization that's doing a social emotional type of thing, which raises the cost. So yes, they're keeping children, it's providing after school care to keep them off the streets, but they're also doing, like Simon says, that you're providing an alternative for expanding someone's and providing them access to a skill that they probably wouldn't have. So to also add that the cost per child may be high, but when we, in this chapter of the statute that establishes this, it says that there's like a diversionary type of expenditures we can make to keep children out of juvenile justice. So while the cost per child may be high for, say, the circus, because I did thought that was high, and I'm just like, what are they doing over there? It's much cheaper than us paying for someone to be at the detention center. So it's kind of like we can invest in the children now, and it's not good that, we want to look and weigh cost benefit. I'm not saying we just spend and be expensive, because anybody knows me knows I am like really tight. But we invest in children and our young people now so that we're not spending so much on the back end on them and not getting anything out of it. Because children that are sent to me that are under juvenile justice, spending as a society a lot of money on them, and when they're released, they're not coming back to society any better off than what they were most times. I'm not criticizing DJJ, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying I just think it's money better spent on the front end of us. And for our providers, we do want them, if they come to us and if they can justify or provide documentation as to why their cost of delivering services is so high. I don't want us to, as a board, to say, no, we're not doing that because right now we have extra money, and in the future we may not, and we want you to cut your costs down because we want to be able to serve the kids. But we got to train and develop the next generation, and so the family may not be able to afford for their child to pay for their child to go to coding or pay for additional counseling services and something like that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have access to it. Voters have said they're willing to pay a tax for that. I just want everybody to try to keep that in mind. We don't want to just, because we're providing services to underprivileged or marginalized kids and children that live in poverty, that we would be cheap on the dime with them and not allow them to have access to some services that a child that would come from some assets.
Okay. Well, so I would say that when we start to really put things out and we want to look, we need to look at who we're trying to target. Are they high risk? Are they already in the system? Which then relates to the intensity of what's being provided and the scope of what's being provided. So I think it was Dr. Simon who said if all we're doing is just kind of boarding them after school and making sure they're in a safe place, that should be with low risk kids, that should be relatively easy. However, if you're taking kids that are already in the juvenile justice system and trying to mitigate further risk, providing a lot of intensity, broader scope of services, including stuff in the home or with social emotional development, then that's going to have a higher cost to it. So I think it's kind of who are we serving, what's the scope of the services and how intensive are they, and then how many supports those services need, right? So if you don't have any equipment, cost per child is going to go down. If you're providing something that is high risk and requires additional supports, that's going to be, so I think we just need to manage all of that as we look at these and analyze them.
Well, we've already started to have a good conversation.
It is 5 o'clock.
It is? Okay, 5 o'clock, so, did you have more?
Yes, I just have two other updates.
Okay, well, we're gonna put you on hold, because we have to do we have to,
Yes.
501. Kevin knows we did our script. So, we want to, call a hiatus on our regular meeting, and call to order, public hearing for the Children's Trust of Alachua County, for the public hearing for the budget and millage rate. And I will begin by the Children's Trust of Alachua County convenes a public hearing of fiscal year 2022, final millage rate and final budget as required by Florida statutes, chapter 125 and 200, as advertised in the Truth and Millage Trim Notices, as well as the Gainesville Sun newspaper on Thursday, September 23rd, 2021. If anyone in our audience is here for the purpose of contesting their assessment, a petition for adjustment with the Value Adjustment Board should have been filed by 5 p.m. Tuesday, September the 10th, 2021. This information was included on the trim notices sent to each taxpayer. Petition forms were available from the property appraiser's office. This evening, we will take a number of actions related to the adoption of the final millage rate and budget for fiscal year 2022. I urge you, if you have not already done so, to get a copy of the agenda so you may easily follow the proceedings this evening. Citizen comments will be taken following the overview on the tentative budget by the chair and the executive director. The Trust Council will now present an overview on the truth and millage legislation, followed by the executive director's explanation of the final and rollback millage rate. Everybody, grip their chairs. Exciting portion of the meeting.
In 1980, the Florida legislature adopted what is known as the Truth and Millage legislation, or TRIM as it's called. The goal of the legislation was to ensure that taxpayers were advised of the public hearing at which the local taxing authorities' budgets and millage rates were to be considered and adopted. Each year, the property appraiser completes an assessment of the value of all property and certifies to each taxing authority the taxable value of the property within its jurisdiction. Each taxing authority then notifies the property appraiser of its proposed millage rate, its rollback rate, and the date, time, and place of the public hearing to consider the proposed millage rate and the tentative budget. Once the property appraiser receives the information, they send a notice by first-class mail to every taxpayer on the assessment roll. The notice sent to taxpayers is called the trim notice. The trim notice lists what the taxes were for the prior year, what the taxes will be if the proposed budget changes are made, what the taxes will be if no budget changes are made. This information is listed for each taxing authority. The notice also lists all voted levies through debt service. The purpose of the trim notice is to provide taxpayers with sufficient basic information to enable them to participate in the public hearing process.
This says chair, do you want me to read it? One of the requirements of the Truth and Millage legislation is to provide information about why a final millage rate differs from the rollback millage rate. Final millage for the Children's Trust of Alachua County is 0.5 mils. Rollback millage rate, as defined as the millage rate which, exclusive of new construction, additions to structure, deletions, and property added to geographic boundary changes, will provide the same ad valorem tax revenue for each taxing authority as was levied during the prior year. Everybody get that? The trim process requires that a notice of tax increase be advertised when the current year final aggregate millage rate exceeds the calculated aggregate rollback millage rate. Aggregate rollback millage rate is calculated by dividing the prior year estimated property tax revenue by the current year property value multiplied by 1,000. Current year taxable value does not include new construction. For the 2022 tax year, the rollback rate calculation is 0.4808 mils. The final millage rate represents a 3.99 increase over the rollback millage rate. A notice of tax increase is advertised. Current year FY 22 property tax revenue for the Children's Trust of Alachua County millage is $8,683,207. Executive Director will now present an overview of the final budget for the fiscal year 2021-2022.
Chair, the total Children's Trust budget for fiscal year 21-22 is $8,432,380, which is equal to the tentative budget adopted by the board during the September 13, 2021 public hearing. Discussed it in depth prior to this, and bound copy is at your seat. Mr. Chair, this concludes my comments on the final budget. I would be happy to answer any questions about the budget at this time.
Do you have any citizens who would like to comment on the fiscal year 20, on the budget, on the millage rate? Okay, what I'm supposed to say is I would like now to invite the citizens to make comments. If you've not submitted your comment card to the clerk of the trust, please do so now. Members of the public recognized by the chair will have 3 minutes to speak on the subject of this current hearing. The clerk of the trust will function as the official timekeeper. Members of the public may not share or transfer all or part of their allotted time to another person. The hearing will continue until everyone who wishes to address the board has the opportunity to speak. If anybody do that, no comments. Okay. I would like to now close the public comment section of the public hearing. So, your executive director.
Chair, the budget document before you, the fiscal year 22 final budget is unchanged. Is unchanged, at least for the purposes of approval authority. From the tentative budget adopted by the board in September 13, 2021 public hearing. Any additional adjustments to this budget can be made by motion at this time.
Motion. Just the motion.
Okay, move approval of resolution 2021-15, millage rate.
I'll second.
Have a motion second. This one you can vote for today?
No.
You can go for this one. Okay, the judge will not vote on this. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Okay, that's right. Thank you.
Millage rate?
Yes.
Member Cornell?
Yes.
Member Hart? Member Florida?
Yes.
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Yes.
Conley? Yes. Member Wilson Bullard?
Same percentage.
Florida statute requires that the name of the taxing authority, the millage rate to be levied, the rollback rate, and the percentage change over the rollback rate be publicly announced. Accordingly, the Children's Trust of Alachua County has determined that the final millage rate of 0.5 mils is necessary to fund the final Children's Trust of Alachua County budget. So we need a motion.
Resolution 2021-16, final budget.
Motion, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion second. Okay. I can do this. Roll call.
Member Sherman? Member Cornell?
Yes.
Member Hart?
yes,
Member Florida?
Yes.
Yes.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Yes.
Okay, with that, is the concluded public hearing, and thank you all very much. Next year. Okay, now we'll go back to our regular meeting. Chrissy?
update is regarding the Youth Development Capacity Building Collaborative. This is the collaborative that we introduced to the board last month. The update was, not last month, 2 weeks ago, I guess. The update is that, as of this morning, we have 29 providers registered to participate in the collaborative. And as I was stated earlier, our board trainings will start, in the month of October. And then my last update, is regarding, the unallocated funds that Colin mentioned, earlier. The program staff is working to design a process to provide continuation funding for some of our currently funded programs. So what the staff is doing, we're working with Colin, working with our new evaluator, Bonnie, to create a criteria that we will be presenting to you all at the October meeting. From that criteria, we will then be able to take end of the year program reports and select providers that we would be recommending for contract renewal. So that will address that the unallocated funds, as well as we're hoping to address those strategies that we have not been able to fund. Additional information will be coming at the October meeting about the criteria.
So, first of all, that's great, I'm glad to see that. Did I just hear you say that, Christie, that maybe goal 3 and 4, you may have some recommendations on that for all children within a safe community? Great, and all children have rights to support care. Okay, thank you. For that, even if it's different.
Any questions of Christie? All right, now we go to public comment. How are we doing this? Programs that teach kids and educate how they can protect and preserve our natural resources. 2010, Alachua Law School started its first science club out of the gate school. This was active to help students not just comprehend science, also have fun and learning about what's going on. PhDs recognized and work together to better prepare our children for academic success. CAC's goal is to teach this comfortable science and elementary age. Innovative ways to get students familiar with science. Including Browns Elementary, Williams and Lake Forest Elementary, Harrington Sheriff Nursery School, and Cone Public Library. In 2020, Alachua Law School is encouraging Alachua station on our site includes physics, biology, astronomy, entomology, geology, food, so much more. We share books, rides, calendars, and other creative tools that make science. know whether she can hear or not, whether she's on, but, please consider it, something saying. So thank you for the.
Hello,
Wanda, you got
can you hear
a
me?
minute? Yes, ma'am. You have,
Uh,
thank you for your video, and if you want to say something, you got about a minute left.
I just wanted to say that this program, I don't know, the sound was horrible from my end, but this is a program that we started 10 years ago, trying to get our kids interested in sciences when they're in elementary school. We have had up to 10 clubs that are in different parts of our community, mostly in areas where our schools are failing the most. Cultural Arts Coalition has been doing after-school programming for more than 30 years now. We need support in our community. We supported the Children's Trust Fund because we thought that it would reach and help us in the community. Too many times now that does not happen. I see where you all have hired another staff person. That scares me in two ways. One is that that's going to make it even harder. That's going to be some more hoops that small organizations like Cultural Arts Coalition is going to have to jump through. You're being more of a part of the problem than the solution. Cultural Arts Coalition is interested, and we have been going into those pockets where other organizations are not. I don't know if you all noticed, but we've had an increase in juvenile violence in our community. We had a meeting with some young people, and they stated that one of the reasons that they feel that violence is up is because a lot of kids don't have anything to do. The gangs are doing better recruiting now. They don't ask for qualifications. They provide jobs. They might be illegal, but they provide jobs, and they provide activities. We need more activities in our community. We need Children's Trust and everybody involved with it to help us in the community, to be a part of the problem. Our teens said that they would appreciate Depot Park having something for teenagers. They talk about the lack of activities that they have. They suggested even having a movie night or something. But our program, our organization, try to go and work with those kids that need to be worked with. We're sorry that we don't meet Children's Trust qualifications, but Children's Trust does not meet a lot of our qualifications. So we need to work together to build programs for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the video. I'll tell you what, why don't you come to the podium, we'll ask you to use the podium.
Sure.
And if you'll be kind enough to tell us who you are, and 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Levitt, and I'm the Parenting Program Coordinator at Project Youthville. We were the unsolicited proposal that's at the bottom of the agenda for today. In our evaluation from last year, which is in the meeting notes, you will see that we were asked to fill out a chart measuring the results of our program that said how many, how well, and better off. And that measurement was to be quantified as a percentage. I sat for a really long time thinking about how to measure how well we served our students as a percentage. I wanted to give an idea of what our program was like that the how well didn't measure without qualitative data. In addition to meeting our target number of children despite being a pandemic and not having a class of students in session, we also hosted classes once a week for 8 straight months over Zoom. But one of the main things I wanted to talk about were some of the other things we spent time working on with students. I don't know any parent who is a better parent while they're worrying about their lights getting shut off or pulling their child in and out of childcare because they can't make payments while they work on a childcare assistance application. We worked over
worked through over 20 CARES applications, getting funding approved for around 15 individual students. We took mothers to prenatal appointments when they didn't have transportation and wouldn't have received care otherwise. You know that you can't take your children to a prenatal appointment with you right now, even if you're a single parent. We coordinated childcare at the school while taking mothers to their prenatal appointments. You know if you don't have a job, you can't receive most childcare assistance. So when you're out of work, you can't get a job because you can't afford childcare, and your application will not get approved unless you have a job already. You're expected to be able to pay the weeks of childcare while you apply and start work until your application is approved. We've worked with our students paying for childcare for them so that they can start working and would like to have the ability to do that more often, which is why the increase in childcare budget in our proposal. We've gotten students into Santa Fe college classes and helped them with those classes. We've arranged students and their children to meet with licensed mental health counselors at our school. We've worked with grant-funded legal services to meet and talk with our students so they know their rights around their housing and so they don't illegally lose their housing. We've purchased and coordinated donations of diapers, formula, clothing, cribs, car seats, books, and toys. We filled out over 20 ELC applications with students, over 10 utility assistance applications, and about 15 financial aid applications for college. We have a unique relationship with the students at Project Youthful because they trust us and our school. These students rely on the level of case management that we are able to provide them and that they will not receive through any other organization that is currently being funded. We have done a lot in working with these young parents to not only teach them parenting skills, but also to try and relieve some of the stress of the barriers that they face every day.
Ms. Levin, I need you to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
When they feel comfortable coming to us for help, it makes them a better parent. So they reached out to us for help, and for that, I say that they are all better off.
Thank you very much. Hey, Jonathan.
Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Jonathan Wesley, and I first of all wanted to thank the truck staff. They came out, we do a farm share event one time a month. Our students started that pre-pandemic as an initiative that they wanted to do, and it was nice. We always invite partners to come work side by side with us so they can meet our students, and it's our CrossFit workout for the week. The truck staff came and helped us. I also want to thank all the board members for all that you do. I know I only have 3 minutes, maybe I can get a couple more seconds, but I think you guys touched on a really important topic earlier with the cost per participant. You know, when we look at total numbers that we serve, cost per participant, I think we have to be very careful of how we evaluate and measure that. To serve a youth build student, national average is usually about $15,000. That's pretty expensive. Think about it, but when you look at what is happening, it's a complete wraparound service as far as the young person's getting paid to be there. Counseling's paid for, eyeglasses are paid for, transportation's paid for, all these things are paid for. And there's return on investment studies done on that dollar that you spend, and it gets, for someone that's already involved in the criminal justice system, it's up to almost $44 for every dollar you spend, you get $44 in return when you invest in a youth build. So anyway, I think that's important, and I think the other reason it's important is that's really kind of how our parenting program is as well. We may not serve the most kids, but sometimes to solve issues of inequity, you don't need to serve the most, you need to serve the least served. And that is what we're done, and that's what we're going to continue to do. I was hopeful that we would get the support of the trust to do that. I'm not sure if that'll happen. It was really disappointing for me to get the email last week that was denying our request. You know, the email cited a year-end report from October 2020 and said that it lacked data. Well, we got our contract in June 1st, 2020. We started operating in July, August 2020. So 2020 of October, we had 2 months of data. I don't know how you make a decision, make that the largest part of your decision to not fund a program based off 2 months of data. There are some other reasons thrown in there as well. You know, this is the form we received on October 9th, and we were asked to have it back by October 13th. We got it back, we filled in the information. We've done results-based accountability framework since almost 2015-16. The United Way here locally has done it. When they implemented that, they did extensive staff trainings with people. They went over all of the reporting requirements, best practices, how to do that. They convened the community, they convened every partner that they were funding. We still meet with the United Way every quarter to go over our results-based accountability, and we turn in reports every quarter as well.
John, I need you to wrap it up.
I completely understand why it was hard for the trust staff to do that, starting in the middle of a pandemic, not being fully staffed, being new. And I can appreciate that because I can understand how hard it was to take that on. But I'd like to see, I guess, a little reciprocation of understanding the challenges that other people have faced and a little bit of grace for them. You know, to have our program based off of a 2-month evaluation that we haven't met with anyone yet to date about performance with the trust. That should be a concern to you all. I mean, we are given money, and I'm trying, you know, I feel like I'm begging for peanuts there's millions of dollars. We have really important needs, and I feel like they're being ignored, and I'm not sure why that is. You know, we met with Teresa Drake the other day, who's helping with one of our young people. Said that they were involved in one of the most nuanced.
Mr. Leslie, I need you to wrap it up. Thank you. Appreciate it. Virtual words.
Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Hi, this is Leah Gallione. I'm with the Gainesville Bridge Literacy Program. Again, I want to echo what the previous 3 speakers have said. It is extremely hard to navigate through the hoops that Children's Trust has set up. Our program was funded from the beginning in March 2020. We started in January of 2020. We have data. Unlike the other organizations, due to their circumstances that don't have data, we do have the data. We are moving kids. Our program helps kids learn how to read. We have a huge education gap here in Gainesville. Nobody is addressing kids from 3rd grade and up. We have 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th graders that cannot read, cannot put together 4-letter words. Our organization has served over 75 students. I have 30 volunteers waiting to be assigned students, and our program has 0 funding right now. We have got to come together and figure out a way to fund these programs, not just mine, but the people that have spoken before us that are reaching kids and doing what the Children's Trust was designed to do with the millions of dollars that you have, and put that with the agencies that are actually reaching these kids. And so, you know, I can't tell you how that's done, but what is being done is not working. And you're hearing that from the people with boots on the ground. And I really encourage you to figure out a way to fund these agencies that through whatever hoops have been drawn, whatever lines have been drawn, we couldn't get funding because we didn't qualify as an after-school program. However, we're reaching kids after school, but our program runs virtually. So, you know, we have data showing kids are moving 1.2 reading levels in 12 weeks. We have the data, we have the volunteers, we need the funds, and we need y'all to release them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for what you do. Anyone else like to speak? Okay, I want to conclude the general comments, and the next thing would be any comments from the board.
And I think based on the last meeting and based on the comments that we've just heard, and I feel like the point of Children's Trust, we're probably not quite right now meeting the mark, because these are organizations that we've heard of. I know, like, specifically Project Youth Build, I mean, the submission was prior to, and of the Duval programs that we have, this is the one, and the other one where we had with Carla, not being able to even access the funding. I mean, I think we need to kind of talk about what we're doing and how we can meet the needs, because I feel strongly when we have very active, engaged, community-involved people who are calling us and telling us we're not meeting their needs, I think we really need to hear it. I don't know what the problem is that needs to be fixed, but it seems like we are inaccessible to groups of people who need accessibility. I would like us to talk about Project Youth Build, if we possibly could at some point, about the funding. I know we had a discussion, I know this is, sorry, horrible on a board level, but we talked about the Boys Club last meeting, and they ended up being added on this list. Youth Build put this in. The last meeting, there was a misunderstanding of Youth Build even being there. What I see of things that are being done are, these are important things for, it seems like in Project Youth Build, we're hitting a couple of generations of youth because we're talking about young parents and their children. So we're hitting all those areas we're looking at. So I guess I'd like to discuss this specifically, but I also think we need to really listen to the feedback that we're getting. Even people who received the awards had constructive criticism, and I think this is when we listen to our critical friends and we figure out how to do this better. Because when we look at wanting to have these types of trusts in the future, when we want to go out to the community and we ask for it to be put on some form of a campaign levy, if we don't look like we're being good stewards and the money is going into the purpose of, and the intent of the entire thing, then we're going to struggle getting this in the future, I think. As I mentioned, I think what we're trying to do is important and we should be funding it anyways. And so I just want to appeal to the group that I am hearing a lot of organizations that we should be collaborating with who do not feel we are collaborative.
I think part of what's happened is that we wanted to have programs starting pretty quickly. And so when you do that and you haven't yet set your priorities, and you haven't set your structure, and you don't have staff, it isn't, it's a definitely whitewater kind of a moment, right? And I think that's why when we had the conversation about the unsolicited proposals in our committee, and I stressed to both Christy and Colin that I think we need to make sure there's a vehicle, whether that's through the youth collaborative, through our new engagement person, to hear all of those voices, because I was very concerned too that we were not hearing all of the voices. I also think we need to be clear that when you're issuing these kinds of funds, there are hoops. They don't come without hoops. I as somebody who was government funded for decades, never had any money given to me that didn't come with hoops except for donors who would just say, here's a check, do what you need. That's not how we can award money. So I think we have to figure out a structured process that makes clear what the expectations are, and then we provide support to meet those expectations. I don't disagree that I think it's been sort of a fits and starts kind of a process so far and has left some people feeling left out and unheard. I think we now have a couple of vehicles that hopefully will address that. And that, if we need something or we hear something that's a huge need that we think needs to come to the board and be considered for funding, that's why we're all board members, because we hear those and we can bring them and ask that they be put on an agenda for further discussion. So I think that's appropriate. But I do get concerned that we not suddenly then, there's so many good programs out there that may or may not fit with a current particular priority, or programs that got one-time funding and now, they're good programs, but is it where we're headed this minute? So I think it's worth a conversation, and I think certainly I'm hopeful that we'll get feedback at meetings from both our new engagement person and Christy around some of the things that come up at the collaborative. I hope it's more than us just telling them what the hoops are, but also hearing from them what the needs are in a different way than what we may be aware of.
Lee, on tab 11 is the county cap awards that we did last meeting. On page 123, it shows about $1.3 million of funding. For those of you not familiar with the CAP program, it's the Community Assistance Partnership Program that the county commission does to address children, poverty, housing, and food. I counted in this about 18 children organizations that the county funded a little over $500,000. I know the city of Gainesville is also doing a new youth group for funding of about $750,000. And so my question, I guess, to Colin is, who at the trust staff is tasking with looking at both the county's programs and city's programs and making sure that we're coordinating at all or understanding how we're each funding. Like caring and sharing, or the Cultural Arts Center, the Cultural Arts Coalition number 12, that's a quantity, was funded by 15,000. And these are 3-year awards. This is 22, 23, 24. There's also been some discussion at the board level about increasing this funding next for some of these programs that are really making headway in our community. So have somebody that you're tasking to coordinate with the county and the city on these other awards outside of the trust?
So right now, it's me, we have the programs team. One of my asks, other counties have a coordinating council. One of my asks tomorrow is going to be that the county support a coordinating council with all the funders and policymakers and other models. But the other thing, we talked about the procurement code, and we looked, the trust is within its code to piggyback on any of these awards. That's one of the recommendations. I think if we just, next meeting, we'll have some recommendations to get some of the organizations that we've contracted with pretty quickly.
So if we get, for the board members, Colin's presenting to the Board of County Commissions tomorrow at the agenda, and so maybe out of that, we'll get some discussions. Okay, that's great.
Do you have an idea what time that'll be?
Ish.
Ish. I guarantee it'll be ish.
It won't be before one?
I don't think so, and if you're planning to attend, I can make sure it's not, I can move it back. That would be great.
You tell me when to be there, and I'll be there.
Yeah, okay, well, let's shoot for one. We've got some things that may come up, that I'm gonna push back, but let's try to shoot for that if you can come, that would be great.
I'll be there.
Secondly, to Dr. Simon's point, I'm very happy to hear, what staff's opinion of what their thoughts were on the Project Youth Build. I think after tomorrow's meeting and our October 11th meeting, we might have some additional recommendations coming from staff, but did you want to comment on that specifically, or wait?
I think the letter we wrote would be our comment.
The letter indicated, as I read it, that there may be some funding in the future. That's, okay.
And isn't that what you just said about the next meeting?
Started at 11:30. He was asking when will their agenda items be on.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
Proclamation, a little bit.
Appreciate it.
Bob was
If
squirming.
you could get there at 11:30 and wait till 4, you should be okay.
No, I don't think I will do. I just think
Ish. It's ish. One-ish.
my tracker will be called.
I hear you. Okay.
Jenny, did you have something?
I did. So I wasn't sure if I missed something earlier, so Collins is saying staff will bring something, but I was actually going to make a motion that, we went down that exception trail last meeting. There was a comment made that these children that need to be served, there was X number of kids or whatever. We're at that point right now. The programs that we've heard from and my motion was going to be that we authorize the ED to look, we have the proposal that was included in our packet. I haven't found it in the notebook, but in the packet from Project Youth Bill. So we have a dollar amount on that. I'm not sure what Cultural Arts Coalition requested, nor the Greenville Literacy Initiative. I was going to make a motion that we would authorize the ED to negotiate with those three organizations, because those are children that have needs that need to be met, and they're organizations that we dealt with in the past, and that we need that negotiate to fulfill whatever that need was that was reasonable, evaluated and to have that.
I would like to hear from at the next meeting, because I'm uncomfortable with that motion.
Well,
Go ahead, Jim.
well, what I was going to say, Mr. Chair, was, I don't know if you were here, but there's going to be a recommendation coming back to this board for 300 and some odd thousand of unallocated funds. That's going to be coming from Christie and the evaluation team. Funded. That's going to be on the October 11th meeting.
So the criteria for those funds will be presented to the board in October. All of the reports are coming from the providers. They're due back to trust staff on the 5th. It is the November meeting where we will come with recommendations of who we think, whose contract should be renewed. So October, we're coming back with the criteria. November, we'll have all the reports, evaluate what they fit, and present to you recommendations.
And would it be staff's intention that is Project Youth Build and the Quantum program, and everyone you just mentioned, literacy program, would they come back at that time, the staff is recommending funding? Is that what you're thinking?
And that literacy program has been funded. So they also submitted a unsolicited.
But staff is hearing us, and what you're saying back to us is, give us till October to present criteria, in November to present recommendations.
These entities have to use what's on. There will be some criteria, some additional information that we will require.
So are they considered partially submitted and they need to complete their applications, or do they need to give you the intent of?
For the criteria, we're going to use what they have already been provided. They've been provided a template for the end of the year report. From there, we will determine who advances, and then they will be provided with some additional information. Because what we need to know is, performance levels. Will that adjust, or will they need to revise that based on what we've already done? So they will be provided with some additional guidelines, and then submit additional information for us to review.
So Project Youth Build is a submission right now, okay. And then,
No, let me clarify. Project Youth Build will have an end-of-the-year report, so they will be included. What they have submitted to us now, there will be additional information that they're submitting because they are funded. Their funding has continued through this contract year. So the 2 months of information that he referenced, he will have additional information from that point to submit.
and then one more question about the literacy. She mentioned that because she was in an online instruction, it didn't qualify as after school. We're not allowing any virtual presence as an after school. So I will just throw out there, I think that we need to re-examine that because we are offering at our school district after-school tutoring through a virtual setting. We offered an entire school year of virtual instruction, and I think specifically how we are with COVID and education and how children engage. I mean, I think virtual instruction is a valid form of delivery of instruction. My 2 cents.
If that's not one of the criteria now, somebody needs to make a
May I comment?
Yeah.
So we're funding after-school programs where kids went to site and did homework help, enrichment activities, had a snack, or cared for. In the proposal there, I believe they submitted a COVID plan if COVID happened and they had to do something else. So it's not true that we didn't allow any online activities if they had to do that. The primary purpose of the after-school RFP was to find a place for kids. In this particular RFP, we can do others, but this one was a very specific solicitation. After-school programs, tutoring, if you're not doing any other activities and there's no, that was not a part of this RFP. That doesn't mean it's never gonna be a part of an RFP. It doesn't mean we'll never fund it. That doesn't mean there's a policy. For this specific RFP, it was to provide extra seats for places for kids to go. And that's it. So, that's what it was.
For clarifying, the design and development of the RFP, can you explain that process?
That was done by staff. Typically, the board approves the RFP.
We saw it. Came to us.
You know, it was on the agenda.
I just was hoping he could explain it to me one more time.
Now I forgot the question again.
Can you just explain the design of an RFP process and like when you would, I'm specifically interested in like feedback from the board.
Yeah, so the board typically approves scope of service, the term, in other words, the term and the number of renewals, the evaluation criteria and the reviewers. All right. At the meeting on August 9th, a motion was made to just let the staff do it because we wanted to get money out. And we told them. Yeah, so we took the direction from the board on August 9th to just get it done, have something ready to fund on October 1st, which we did. And as I said earlier, it was not, a lot of questions we had that we, typically the board always approved like you did for Help Me Grow, the entire scope of service, the evaluation criteria, the reviewers, the terms, funding amount, all of that is approved by the board prior to its release.
So if we gave direction to not allow for virtual as a criteria, I'm okay with changing that direction today if you need that direction change.
You don't need that to do our October.
You're allowing, so just to clarify, Dr. Simon, you are allowing for
Yeah.
virtual instruction, okay, because I think there was a misunderstanding. I heard that criteria was not being evaluated, but it is.
So, there's two things. The after-school RFP that we're negotiating had a specific scope of service. Everyone, after-school programs, how many days, in person, the minimum ratio, you know, your place has to, you have to be able to have a safe place,
Yeah.
There was some minimum criteria, basically based on the floors. That's that RFP.
Okay.
It's continuing, which means that some groups that had received funding from us, that didn't do those things, will not be eligible. The continuation funding, that we're gonna recommend from the providers we currently work with, that is gonna be that's gonna be based on, updated information they've, submitted, additional information. There's no new application, they're already doing the annual report. That is whatever the program. And there was a wide variety of programs funded.
And so if it's virtual, they can continue doing it.
Yeah, some people did I mean, yes, there's no, that is what their program. We solicited, we procured after-school seats. That's where we more places for kids to go. It's more of a grant where people say, here's what we want to do, and, you know, just give us, you know, fund us to do that.
Got it. Okay.
Any further questions?
I just want to respond to the exception piece. And, you know, I made the motion at the last meeting to do the exception for Boys and Girls Club with great reticence, because exceptions are a slippery slope when you're doing any kind of procurement process. I worded it the way I did specifically because it was a rapid turnaround RFP at a time when organizations were still stressed by COVID, and the only issue was that it got in a day late. I'm very leery and very cautious of setting up a process of awarding grants and awarding aid when we then make exceptions because an organization comes to us and presents. I think if we have a process, we have a process. Any of us who have written grants have had great programs that have been not funded because it wasn't really responsive to the RFP, fatal flaw in the application. I'm very leery of setting ourselves up in a way that everything can become an exception. And there's so many good agencies and organizations doing phenomenal work and needed work. But if we set up a process and we set up an RFP, we can't keep second guessing ourselves once it's done.
Unsolicited proposal, that was I guess you all appealed that before I got here.
Yeah.
But there were others that were received before that.
Right.
So, I mean, this isn't been in a process. That process was in place at that time for funding. So we were receiving unsolicited proposals at that time.
We were.
So.
We were.
For them, that's not an exception.
Right, but
the other two organizations that they're not responding to, if they didn't respond to an RFP, Cultural Arts Coalition would be an exception. Gainesville Literacy or Gainesville Bridge, I'm watching up the name of it, but that would be an exception. But Project Youth Bill was not. That was an ED with all the rigmarole of that. That was just not a recommendation for funding. So my motion would be that we, as a board, authorize the executive director to negotiate with Project Youth Bill unsolicited proposals to fund them at this time, because that's my motion. Based on the information that's received in the packet.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
One second.
Any discussion?
So, Member Shorten, on the response from the executive director, that's directly about it. Paragraph 3 on page 115. Two things in that circle that are and big items. Last sentence of paragraph 4 says, we also realize you're preparing your final report for fiscal year 21. I hope that once you see your final report, you will better understand the program's performance. That was Christie's point, that we're going to get all the information and not just rely on. In the last sentence of the next paragraph, we have a big interest in seeing the potential to grow and develop, and for access to high-quality childcare so that we can get this family. So what I just heard staff say is in November, we're going to bring back recommendations after we have this criteria in October. And I feel like they're doing exactly what your motion is asking, at least for Project Youth Bill, which is to understand their program, and then if it meets our criteria to negotiate with them. So I think I could vote for your motion, and they can still do what they said they were going to do. Because that's what he said, they're bringing us back recommendations in November. Gainesville Literacy and Cultural Arts Center, I'm not sure about. You know that what he just said is that it's the county funding the Arts Center. They could piggyback off that if it met the criteria of the trust. I agree with that. And that's what you're telling, if you're planning to do is meet the criteria. I don't know enough about the literacy to say yes. I want to support your motion, but I also want to Maggie's point, really follow our process that we laid out. We have an amount of unallocated funds, and I want to give staff a chance to give us some recommendations. In addition to these very important three organizations, I just named 18 in the CAP program, and both in the kitchens during the meeting, we have 0 allocated to children living in a safe community, which I think Project Youth really qualifies for, good potential qualifies. So I'm not sure how to support your motion. Now,
I think I dropped off 2 programs at Project Youth. I was trying to stick with process that existed at the time and not be an exception, and I said that prior to that, but.
Well, I feel like they are going to come back to us with a Project Youth Build potential based on Thursday after they look at all the information.
So I guess I was hoping perhaps we could also get some clarity from Project Youth Build. So I know that he was in the bundle of the group, and it was submitted to Children's Trust prior to, and it seems like some of those individuals applied for the other RFP, and I guess, is it qualifications weren't something you could meet, or was it a lack of communication that you didn't know that you needed to do this?
And this is the proposal on page 120 and 121, right? The 2-year, 180,000, you were funded the first year, it's the second year. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to get a debate about the specific things. I don't think this is the place. I think we have staff, we need to work on a motion, and the motion is, actual up or down, whatever it goes to. It's going to staff, it's coming back to us in 2 months.
I thought we had the opportunity to discuss right now.
The question is to discuss the motion.
That was my question, was like the actual, like the process of how we got here, because was it totally an unsolicited proposal?
Yes.
In the sense that some of the others who were unsolicited also applied again to that other RFP that was awarded. And so my question is, why didn't that happen? I'm really just interested in process, because I think one of our issues that we're trying to wrestle with is our process. So it's really just a clarifying question.
And I think that you probably got an explanation that this one fell through the cracks because it didn't go, it went to Colin as opposed to Christie.
So I think.
That's not right.
Okay, go ahead.
A different way I would say is people were starting to use the unsolicited proposal process because they didn't believe we were moving fast enough on refunding programs that were supposed to be one-time funding.
Gotcha.
So the board in 2020 gave 6 months of funding to programs with the option to carry through another year. Youth Build and 40-something others were part of that original funding, and about 7 or 8 capital projects. I wouldn't really call them projects, but purchases bands and stage equipment, things like that. So everyone was told, and frankly, to be honest with you, I had no idea what we had just funded, and had to hire someone to read all the stuff and put together those end-of-year reports. The end-of-year reports were not the reason that I recommended not to fund. If there were other measures they could have submitted, but I think without circumventing the process that we're setting up, I would say that the program, we have a process which we just laid out, which is to use the end-of-year reports from this year to form the criteria for refunding the very best of those programs that were funded 18 months ago. There was no process. The process was you got the funding, and that was it. That was the process. Now, people, and it's not just you, remember, there's 40-some other counties. And we have been contacted multiple times, doing all kinds of things they should be refunded. So what we did is we have priorities. We have 15 strategies. I think it's appropriate for the board to discuss the strategies, of course, and say we like these, we don't like these. Parenting program and supporting parents is one of our strategies. And, you know, there were a lot of requests made, so we put together a budget and said, here's what's left. And now we have a plan to refund the very best of those programs, using some kind of illusion of order, and we're trying to be fair to everybody. Of course, in our procurement report, you can write a resolution or have us write one fund negotiate with anybody. But we think we think we've laid out a process, program to get the remainder of the funding. And our intention is also, we'll have the final numbers in the summer. We didn't spend anywhere near 1.1 million, so staff is probably going to recommend that some of that be rolled into the unallocated, so that would increase. If by any chance we're able to negotiate some of the after-school programs, that money would roll down. And we do have some match funding, and if you didn't want to use it for match, we could roll that into the unallocated. So, you know.
Colin, if you're talking about money to go out, I would hope that there, you know, people may not like to hear it, but if we're going to have a process, this doesn't need to just be those specific ones. You need to have another RFP. It needs to be, it needs to go out to everybody.
So we're going to have an RFP. There's high transaction costs with RFPs. That's not the only, meaning it takes a lot of time and effort. From training the reviewers, to the scores, to doing it, to writing it, to doing the background knowledge necessary. One of the things I heard at the county yesterday was, don't tell us what the problem is, don't make us look up all the data. That's stuff that we do. We define the problem, we give the data, and we say respond. So we'll have a big one, the after-school one is going to be big. There's going to be multiple agencies, we'll probably award in the 30s. I'm guessing, that's a guess, but it would surprise me, depending on how, you know, how the funding looks. And then really, come March, we're going to have about, because we won't need to put any money away from the building, so that's, if nothing changes, that'd be another $700,000. We don't need to, our reserve fund, we don't need to put money in that, we can just appropriate fund balance. That's $1 million plus what we spend on. In March, we need to start thinking about the solicitation to be effective October 1 for the next year. So we're trying to get on a cycle, but really we're thinking a year ahead. So we're not there yet. And all the, you know, all of the stuff from the first RFP to the unsolicited slows that process down. So the more you do that, you're slowing us getting on a predictably successful process. You can do it, we'll manage.
Okay.
That's where we're heading.
So
there was no process to renew these contracts.
So let me, so the whole board's in here, what is going to be the process for this unallocated money that we have? We just have to contact certain.
Coming in October.
No, coming back in November.
Criteria in October.
Recommendations November.
Okay, and will it be an RFP or is it just
No.
going, so what, that goes to my question.
It's-
How are you going to,
it's
you'll tell us in November.
In October.
You'll tell us in November.
You'll tell us in October.
Our total criteria will tell him in October. He'll tell us recommendations in November.
So we do have a.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, 2 months for a nonprofit is a very, very long time.
As a part of this is just getting our ducks in a row.
I think everybody's worried about that.
That's, and once we finally get in place, it's been a process up to this point, and it's not perfect yet. Mostly as we go through the March, you know, direction from the board, it'll help, you know, staff and Colin get, you know, so we can actually have a process that we can use instead of award money here and award money there, which is what we did initially. I got something going, but it's still not perfect. But we're working on trying, they're working very hard to try to get it to where it's a process that vendors can live with, we can live with, and then we're all pleased with it. The county commission, every year, the cap discussion was like a 5-hour discussion. So I thought we got it squared away one year, and have discussions about, keep the same thing. It's too difficult. The process is too difficult. But, I listen to do your best. I know that they're trying very hard. And we keep listening, come over with something, keep listening, and people have a problem with it, then that thing that we discussed is the self-evaluation.
I'll just make one comment, and it's a fair, we gotta get our ducks in a row. It's a fair, criticism, but when I look back at 40 contracts that, I guess the 5 of us really awarded that first year. I mean, I remember the meetings.
Yes.
Judge Bullard, and it was the previous superintendent, Tina and Cheryl and I, we sat up there and we said, we're creating chaos. I mean, I remember you said it. It's for 1 year, but we're gonna get money out there.
Yep.
And then we're gonna hire somebody and staff to evaluate what we've done, and I feel like, to the staff, I mean, yeah, we did. I mean, to the staff, I wanna tell you, this board, we created this chaos, and you are now putting it into a predictable system. So we put y'all into these mappings, and, I mean, I just appreciate all of you for where you are. You're evaluating 40 programs that we made that decision that evening because we knew it was imperfect, but we wanted to get the money into the community, and we would figure that for that. And that's, I feel like that's exactly where we are right now. And I want to give staff a couple of months, kind of pull us out of the river into the boat and say, it's going to be calm in a minute, just give us a little bit of time. And I feel like that's what they were asking for October, November. And so I agree, Dr. Simon. I mean, there's good criticism. I'm just here to say, me and 4 other of us are responsible for it, and I think we need to take that responsibility and let our staff now get us to where we can have a predictable process.
Well, I hope you're not taking it as a criticism from me. I think this is more we're still in this transitionary piece, and, I mean, really, I was just speaking toward Ms. Burton's motion.
Okay, so if there are no more comments, open up to the public, because we do have a motion.
Repeat the motion,
Excuse me, that, the board authorizes the ED to consider, to evaluate and, negotiate with, Project Youth Bill on the unsolicited proposal.
Nancy's going crazy over there.
Okay.
Nancy Harvey.
Okay, all right. Nancy, Dr. Hart?
Hi, everybody.
Say something?
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear about 2/3 of the conversation, and I would just like to represent the voters and the taxpayers who wish to see accountability for the money given by the Children's Trust. And like Maggie, in the position of our petitioners right now, saying, we're doing good things in the community, please give us money, and please give us money now. But the fact of the matter is, the Children's Trust is creating criteria by which people can expect to get their funding repeated. This is not an ATM machine where you can go back. You have to be able to present your data to be accountable to the voters. And I know that's a pain. Believe me, Maggie knows, I know, it's a horrible pain. But Colin did something which I thought was kind of interesting and extraordinary, in that he offered professional development to nonprofit organizations who feel that they don't have the capacity to fulfill these requirements, to help people write the right grant and then fill the correct report out so they can get their funding continued. And I think this is pretty smart. And people in our community who feel that they're being treated unfairly should be saying, okay, I'll take the professional development, I'll do exactly as you say, and then my expectation is going to be that I will have fulfilled your requirements. And I think that's fair. And if this were happening, and that's what was happening right now, we might be able to critique our staff, but I'm not in a mood to critique the staff right now.
Dr. Hart? Is this about a motion?
It's not for this one.
Okay, anybody want to speak to the motion? All right, so let's do it by roll call.
I'm sorry, I need to hear the motion.
The motion was to, go ahead, Tina.
I don't know that she can hear from over there.
The motion was to negotiate with Project Youth Build and, come back and to fund them. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yes.
To fund and negotiate
Was,
Project
well,
Youth Build.
was it just Youth Build or was it the three?
Just yes,
Just Youth Build,
It was
okay.
just that one.
I think I have to, I just couldn't hear what the issue was with Project Youth Build. I'm really sorry.
That was just to negotiate, and did it
Yep.
also include to actually fund their request?
Yes.
Mhm.
So, yes or no, Nancy?
I guess no, but I couldn't really hear the whole conversation, sorry.
All right.
No.
Yeah.
Member Schneider?
Probably no.
Member Swanson? Wilson Bullard?
Yes.
No.
Pass then.
Okay, so the motion doesn't pass. Okay, so, but you'll come back in 2 months. All right. Any further comments from the board? All right.
For Colin.
Yeah.
Could you give us just a report of, awards and actual spends that we have for this year? What's been awarded and what was actually spent? Because I know we made a lot of awards that haven't been spent, but, if you could send that out to us.
Yep.
Okay, and y'all can see that there's some background information for your
We
information.
still had one more public comment, not on the motion, but it was a public comment.
Oh,
card.
that's right. Jerry? Yes, it is appropriate. Thanks. Thanks.
Good afternoon, my name is Sherry Kitchens. I am the president and CEO of the Advocacy Center here in Alachua County. And I, wanted to say how much I appreciate the time and energy you all put into these. I believe that process is for the future, when there is we're on a cycle that everyone can follow and be predictable, because it is difficult when people. I also would like to advocate for this board to really add to your priorities. Only a few agencies, a very small few that have safety. Advocacy Center being, what we do is insulate from the tough parts, the grown-up parts of how to be and how to friendly. We also work very closely with the at every level, as well as a full I think we really have to work on plans that have had trauma, not even meaning to. That most of you have read the newspaper. That's the fourth page.
again the,
Of the seven, early learning centers, zero of them. Been provided, fall short of, and I really encourage the have the kind of
Sherry, safety is one of our criteria. Safety is one of our criteria. So tell us how, please tell us how we can help. Anyone else? Okay. So, see when our next meeting is. It's October the 11th at 4.
Can I ask one question? So, I don't speak to this, safety, our fourth goal, what organizations do you think about in front of you as a thing?
I don't know that I understand the question, but provide
Can help provide children's
services
safety.
to keep children safe. There are programs, within the Department of Juvenile Justice. There are after-school programs. I consider those programs children safe. Project Youth Bills, the Rikert House, Girls Place, any program, frankly, that provides structure and activities, positions. I consider that meeting that objective and goal.
Perhaps.
Partnership for Strong Family, certainly that's a much larger agency, but yes.
Perhaps Ms. Kitchen can send something to the board saying, in her opinion, which helps with safety as well.
Part of what we have learned this year is that our cases have gone up by 2% as compared to last year, and last year was also. That's part of my anxiety for recognizing that
And if I can add to that too, certainly just any program that provides that's the counseling and trauma-based counseling, which again, Child Advocacy Center in partnership.
Okay, so under the CAP funding, Child Advocacy Center, the county funds 67,000, or was awarded 67,000. Equal Path, 95,000. State Center for Girls, 37,000. These are programs that have been through the county that perhaps we can look at with regards to safety.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate it. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Something about people tell me that it's really hard to hear Zoom. If they're not.
Leave the tabs and take the.
Leave yourself, please. Oh, yeah, I need a signature.
Hey, well, there's something. Sorry, you got a second.
Yeah, but I need
I talked to them.
ladies. Can we meet downstairs?
Yeah, good job.
I don't know that. They call that shit a We're doing great. I thought it was kind of funny. Bye, brother. Bye.